So we want to welcome everybody to our 88 Honest Discussions webinar on accessible social media. I was sharing with our panelists today that it was a bit of a challenge to find government communication people that were willing to come on this panel and talk about social media because a lot of people are really feeling that they're at the beginning of this. So, but we've got some really smart folks in the room today that I think are going to be able to help you a lot. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I am the founder and president of Digital Accessibility by WeCo. We're a mission-based company of digital accessibility specialists where one of our job requirements is to live with a disability to be able to do the work. And this webinar is part of a free public series that we offer free information because we're a mission-based company. And we have two panelists with us today, Abby Teikala and Valerie Lockhart. And I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. Abby, could you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. So I'm Abby Tequila. I work for the South Washington Watershed District. And it's okay. It's a fun last name. It's the fun way to pronounce it. Um, I'm the Water Resources Program Manager over there. At the South Washington Watershed District, we work to protect and restore water resources, natural water resources in the lower Washington County. So.
Great. And Valerie.
I'm Valerie Lockhart. I have a company called Ninja Media. I also have a nonprofit that I work with called the Minnesota Tech Network, and have been non-government communications for about 15 years on the social media side of things. But I have worked with, as clients, lots of government organizations. So happy to be here.
In full transparency, Valerie actually does not do our social media, but she is one of our business analysts and she also is our videographer. So welcome everyone. So Abby, could you start us off by sharing a little bit about your background in accessibility? How did you get to be the social media person and what was your journey like kind of getting started in social media with
Yeah,
accessibility?
yeah, absolutely. So starting in January of 2025, that's when I first attended a WeCo presentation with you, Lynn. And that's when the sort of journey of learning about accessibility got started for me. And then in my role at South Washington Watershed District, I manage our social media. So there was an obvious connection between web accessibility and social media accessibility. So that's sort of where things started getting going for me. And then that evolved into our website and all of our documentation um, and all of those wonderful things that we got to work on and make accessible. So, yeah.
Okay. And Valerie, what was your journey in all of this?
So it's a little bit of learning on the go, I would say. I started out in communications many years ago, working with nonprofits that worked with people with disabilities. And so getting experience that way when I was kind of brand new to social media and to communications, but learning, what people actually need to be able to access information. And from there, when I started my business, I was working with clients that were in all sorts of public facing communications needs. And so uh, I went to school for web development and learned about, HTML structure and how those things are related to accessibility. And from there, working with WeCo and some other organizations, just it's been a passion of mine to make sure that no matter what the information is, it is accessible to as many people as possible, even if it's not government mandated. So it's been I would just say learning by fire and from feedback from real users is the way that I've learned and honed that part of it.
So Valerie, your background too has been in public cable television, correct? I think that'd be of
Yeah, yep.
interest.
I didn't talk about that. So MTN was the public access television provider for the city of Minneapolis for 35 years. And so have worked with that organization for the last 15. We are no longer the public access provider, but having that experience of making sure that, you know, the public has access to both the content that's on the air as well as being able to publish content on the air. So, kind of looking at it from both perspectives of um, being able to digest information and share information. So, you kind of have to have those two-way accessibility going on with that.
Okay, yeah, I think that our listeners are going to find that interesting. So, Abby, could you describe the approach that your organization is taking towards the Title II ADA web rule and social media and what your role is in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the approach we're taking is sort of, I guess, like fire hose. We're just getting all the information as quickly as possible, and trying to implement as quickly as possible. And fortunately, with the extension of the deadline, we've been able to really expand how we're going to approach this, um, and have more time to like practice really. So we're using this first, I guess, this last year as sort of a, a moment to practice how do you implement this in your everyday work. So that's at like an
Mhm.
individual level. At an organizational level, we've taken the approach of having a sort of accessibility gatekeeper. So I'm the person on staff who knows all, or not all, but the most. It is kind of my focus, of how we need to implement accessibility within our website, within our documents, within our social media. And so when another staff member has something that they want to put online, for our organization, it goes through me, and I'm able to kind of assess it in some way, to identify parts that need to be updated or changed or what have you. And then we're also looking at it in sort of a future context, knowing that these rules are not going to go away necessarily, and not that we're interested in them going away, but knowing that we need to take on the responsibility of learning how to implement the kind of guidelines within our work, and navigating, okay, how do we find resources that we can start implementing into our work? So we're working with a new web developer, which has coincided with our new management plan, which is a large state statute document that we have to create every 10 years that basically manages everything we're going to do for the next decade. Which also rolls into, okay, how do we manage our PDFs and remediating all of our PDFs, and determining, okay, what goes, what stays. And then also, sort of on a individual professional level, I've worked a lot with our colleagues within the watershed district world to sort of give them the heads up of like, hey, we need to be looking at this and be made aware of this. Which, funny enough, I don't think folks were really aware of these rules until only a few months ago. And again, that extension really helps. But I'm working individually within my industry to try and spread the word of what's coming and what we need to do to prepare.
So your organization is really trying to build sustainability into the planning. This is not just a reactionary response we're going to have. This is how do we maintain this accessibility going forward?
Precisely. Yes, precisely.
So what is your education path regarding social media accessibility look like, Abby?
Mm. So I mentioned before, I attended that first presentation with you, and that's sort of where it got started. As far as individual resources, I do access the WeCo website a lot for different things that you have available on your website. And then also, I'm looking to the state for their recommendations. As a local government unit, I feel most confident in looking to our higher legislative power, um, to give us recommendations on how to follow through with this stuff. And so I use the Minnesota IT Services social media guide. And then I also use, I have the link up here because I wanted to mention it here today, but the WCAG quick reference guide with that has the filtering options where you can go through by which version, which level, and by topic and tags. And that those are the resources that I'm relying upon heavily. And then also, YouTube, a lot of YouTube, and just trying to kind of see what other people are saying and learn visually, because I learn best visually.
Great. Well, Val, I'd like to know more about how you've educated yourself. Now you're at the end of trying to deliver accessible communications as a profession. So how did you teach yourself and where did you learn?
I think it started in learning the structure of the web. So learning how, websites are structured, what the back end of things looks like, helped me understand the infrastructure that people are engaging with. And so from there, I learned about the WCAG rules, and like I'm glad, Abby, that you brought up that quick reference guide because that's a super helpful um, guide and like reference that you can find all of the answers in. So that has been a really good resource that I lean on. And then just working with people with disabilities. So learning from them, seeing how they engage with things, and taking that information in and enveloping it in my practices have been really meaningful. Um, there's so many things that I just wouldn't have known without talking to people that are having that experience. And so I think just getting feedback and taking it to heart and actually implementing some of those changes has been the way that I've learned the most.
And I think you said something that's really crucial here. Back in the days of the horse and buggy, when I was doing digital accessibility at MnDOT in 2008, and no one knew what it was. And in those days, it was actually Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, and not the ADA web rule that we were trying to comply with, although everybody called it the ADA. But what I started to catch on to with myself and also with the people that I was attempting to teach was that they saw this accessibility as some kind of mystical thing that happens that you're not really going to understand. And then when I was able to really break down for them how a screen reader worked and what I had witnessed in the real experience of screen reader users, and the famous story I tell is that I was sitting in the living room of one of our ADA transition plan board members who used a screen reader, and she was on the MnDOT website, and she was on the navigation menu, and it said bicycling bar, bus bar, train bar, and she said, what is a bar doing in MnDOT's website? And it was a visual aspect without a null tag. And I tell that story and they get it. And it's taking the time to understand how the user's really interacting. It. You don't have to understand code to get it.
Oh,
And it makes it
not at
so much
all.
easier.
And I do think the first time you see someone using a screen reader and like see them get stuck in a loop because
Yeah.
of something that you have done, like that is such a horrifying experience that you will do anything to not have that happen again. Because
Yeah.
it's so disturbing of like just not being able to get out of something to get to the information that you want. And it's something that we as, sighted users just don't even think about. So it's really eye-opening to experience that with someone and then understand the implications of what you're putting out into the world and how it actually hits and engages people.
In understanding that people take in information with just their ears, or just their fingers. If you're deaf and blind, you're using a Braille laptop. And to understand how that connects with what you're putting out in those social media posts. So I'm going to share a screen and we're going to jump over into the basics because we know we've got a lot of viewers that are really interested in, what are the simple things that I can do for accessibility. So this is a handout that we created uh, for the Texas Association of Municipal Information Officers. A few weeks ago, we taught a full workshop on all aspects of digital accessibility down in Austin. And this was our practical guide. So I'm just going to kind of show this, but Abby, could you kind of just talk us through? You don't have to, you can ignore the the handout, but what are the basic things that you kind of do in, day out, and the basic things people could start doing?
Yeah, totally. So the first, I think, easiest thing that I started with was when I'm posting online, specifically Facebook. We use Facebook a lot just because at the local government level, that's where most of our audience is, I would say. And then also, it's just the easiest for information sharing. Instagram isn't really that great. Um, and it doesn't really reach audiences in the same way that Facebook does. So typically when I'm posting on Facebook, I'm if I'm posting a graphic, I'm taking all that critical information that's within, say, like an infographic, and I'm posting it within the text body of the actual post. So folks can, if they're using a screen reader, it is picked up instead of it just being like a picture, essentially. And that's really easy, and I think it actually makes the post look a little bit more professional. I've also seen folks, and I do this sometimes. It's one of the things that, unfortunately, when I'm going through like the speed of trying to like process my work, it's not something I remember to do all the time, but I'm incorporating it more and more. Is doing a image description at the bottom of the post. So if I even when I'm not posting an infographic, I'm just posting a picture of a lake is a common thing I'm posting. Just a brief image description at the bottom of the post, so folks can see that as well. So that's one thing that I'm doing. Other things, again, Facebook. I try to, in all social media platforms, use the posting resources sort of as intended. So I'm not getting creative. And what do I mean by that? So for example, if I'm posting a event, I'm going to use each of the sort of boxes, name of the event, date, start time, end time, the location, all that information, using it as intended, because those resources, screen readers and whatnots are able to pick up on those things. They can't necessarily pick it up in, like I was mentioning before, a picture of an infographic that you use to advertise the event. So using the resources as described. Also, I'm learning more about the limitations of all the social media platforms that we use. So for example, Instagram, I always avoid posting, for example, a link in the caption of an Instagram post. One, because it's not hyperlinked. Instagram doesn't allow you that, which is such a bummer. And also, you can't copy and paste a Instagram caption from mobile, and that is where most people are looking at Instagram, is on their phone. So you could go about it in a roundabout way. If you're on iPhone, you can like take a screenshot, and then you can hover, and you're able to copy and paste text from a screenshot. But I don't know what the extent of that tool is for folks who are using any accessibility within like an iPhone space. So it's just really an unnecessary step. And so I'm avoiding that, but for folks with the different accessibility tools, but also because standard individuals who are not using those tools, it looks silly to have a link in your Instagram caption that's not hyperlinked. So
Can I
doing stuff like
piggyback?
that.
Yeah,
Yes,
can I
please.
piggyback on that a little bit? Because there's, I know some people are using kind of third-party platforms to post things to social media, and I think it's important to talk a little bit about the difference between that because while those tools can be great to, post the same thing to multiple channels all at once, they might save some time. But 9 times out of 10, the accessibility tool is not built into that post. So, like, you can't control the alt text on a lot of them for when you're posting a photo. So in my practice, I go into the platform that it's going into and I post directly in that platform so that I'm not relying on a scheduler or something that doesn't have all of the pieces that are needed for that accessibility in the post. So, to your point, like you can't put a link in the Instagram, but if you go into Instagram and post a story, you can embed a link. So there are ways, but you can't schedule it from a third party to do things like that. So there's some give and take where you might not be able to save the time, but you're actually making things more accessible for people. So thank you for letting
Yeah,
me
no,
throw that in
I'm
there,
with
but
you.
it's a good thing to be aware of.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's
I'm with
hard
you.
because it's not a one size fits all, and you're
No,
busy. And so, how do you streamline that for both of you?
I mean, I just set aside the time. So like as I'm creating content for different channels, I make sure that I set aside the time to go into each of those platforms and post and um, really just set things up the way that they need to be set up for that platform. So it does take more time, but ultimately in the end you're going to get a better result and a better outcome from it. With YouTube, because I feel like Facebook and YouTube are probably the most accessed platforms that people are searching, and especially for government entities, like that is where people are getting the information. They're not necessarily going to your website. So they need, your channels on those two platforms alone are probably the more important ones to focus on. And there's so many good tools embedded in those platforms that you need to use that it's worth the time. So I just make the time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we should probably just jump back a little bit to talk more about the ADA web rule requirements. And, Abby, I'm going to pass this over to you. So, what are you focusing on right now in those web rule requirements?
Yeah, so right now we're focusing really heavily on PDFs. So, like any good government website, we have a whole hell lot of PDFs. There's so many of them. So it's like a twofold process. First, it is determining kind of what we need to just like get rid of and have we don't need, and then of what we're keeping, how to remediate those. And so we're those are the two ways we're approaching it. Um,
I'm just going to do a little
yeah,
redirect here because
yeah,
we did a
sure
PDF one
did.
last month.
Yes,
So
yes,
everybody,
perfect.
we've got a recording of ADA honest discussions on PDFs that you can find on our website from last month. But Abby, how about with the social media?
Yeah,
Um,
with social
uh,
media. Yeah, that one's a tough one. So, because it's just me doing social media, a lot of it is just me learning how to implement this. And then also learning how to work with our partners when we kind of do collaborative social media posts.
right.
Fortunately, at a government level, we're often working with other government partners, so they're subject to the same requirements, but not always. So we will sometimes work with engineering firms, private companies to create content. And when it comes to that kind of thing, a lot of what we're doing there is just trying to have really just kind of honest conversations with our regular repeat partners and folks that we're working with about hey, we want to make sure that we're hitting these different accessibility points. in the social media sphere. And here's what we need from you explicitly. And this will help us reach the most folks as possible. And also, on for a business perspective, for them, have their business be, exposed to more people. So that's kind of the general direction we're heading with things. And then again, right now, we're focusing on practicing. So using this year to really like practice every time we post, um, implementing those steps of, add the alt text, add the caption description at the bottom of the post, add the infographic information into the body of the post, all of that information. So that's kind of the direction and what we're working on right now.
Is there anything regarding social media and the ADA that you're concerned about? Like anything you've always done in social media
Yeah,
that you know now violates that web rule that you're trying to figure out how to do differently?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's things that we've always done because our organization is a little bit different only because we didn't have an education and outreach department until I arrived at our organization
Okay.
about 2 years ago. So what I worry about mostly is how quickly social media platforms change and how often sort of tools that were once provided are, kind of suddenly taken away, or there's different things added that frankly, I don't always have the time to understand. Like, I think Instagram implemented a new like instance recently. Do you know what I'm talking about, Valerie? What is that? I don't know. And this is a new form of communication within an app that I don't know how to work with it, and then also how the ADA rules are going to apply to this brand new form of communication online through social media that it was created after these rules were created. So how do I effectively manage that? So that's what I think about and worry about.
Do you have any insights on that, Valerie?
So the instance, just to go back to that for a second, so that is, it is like more of a in the moment. So like I'm at this thing and I snap a picture and it's almost like a Snapchat. So it's
Like
like
be
a,
real.
yeah, like a quick share image that will disappear. So it's the accessibility of those is probably not even been discussed or thought about because it
Mhm.
is so like just spur of the moment. You're posting it quickly and then you're not able to edit or anything. So I don't I don't think those are going to be accessible pieces of the platform.
And,
But
unfortunately, as often the story with digital accessibility, we're putting the wings on the airplane as it is going
right.
to the runway.
Right. I think what I've been focusing on is more on the content side of like, it is what we're putting out there perceivable and like understandable. So, thinking about more of the audience and like because there's so many neurodivergent folks who are maybe engaging with that, like looking at and kind of auditing content in a different way to make sure that, you know, not that it's just got all of the checklist of accessibility, but like, are we expressing things in a way that will resonate or will be understood by the audience? So looking at it more of that side. And to be honest, that's one way that I've used AI a lot is to help either like translate a message or shift my messaging to be able to meet different audiences where they are. And so a lot of the social media work that I've been doing has been looking at it to make sure that how we're communicating is going to reach the people that we need it to.
And we use AI very similarly, to make sure that our language is inclusive and So, that's a fantastic point. But along that line, good segue, um, automation versus accuracy, knowing what to trust when, and I'll have you start us out, Val, on that.
Yeah. So as everybody knows, AI hallucinates and it makes things up. And it's a great tool for helping get like maybe a first draft of things, but never a final draft without human eyes. And so I think for, it's really easy to use AI to generate social media content, but you still have to have that discernment and go in and look at things, have people look it over. If you're translating into different languages, make sure a native speaker of that language looks it over and make sure that it is accurate in what you're translating. And that is sometimes hard to do when you're moving quickly, but it also can save you a lot of pain in the end, by putting some of those check guards in place because it can be detrimental if you put incorrect information out there. And so I think AI is a great tool. It can help you get like 99% of the way there, but you still need that 1% of human validation before you run with it.
We're about to roll out a company-wide AI policy, and the key in our director team, we keep talking about, it's fine, it's wonderful at organizing our thoughts for things that we already know, but we have to be really careful and dig into where those sources are from the things that we didn't know. How
Well,
about you? Oh,
oh,
go ahead.
I
Go
was just
ahead,
going to say
Valerie.
sometimes we have a blind spot because and this happens even when you're reading a newspaper, right? Like there's there's things we'll see when it's stuff that we know, we're like, oh, well, that's wrong and that's wrong. But then we'll just kind of assume that what we don't know is correct. And like
Oh,
that's where we need to put that discernment on because if you're seeing, you know, hallucinations in the stuff that you know, you should assume that it's happening in the stuff that you don't know as well.
great.
So like don't just think, well, oh, that sounds good. Like actually find somebody who knows that thing and ask them.
Yeah, AI is a little scary. I actually just worked with it this morning for a restructure of our PR and CR teams, and it told me how this was going to how this was going to alleviate my stress, and I'm like, holy crap, how did it know that? It's yeah, sometimes a little too smart. So, Abby, automation, how are you using it? How are you dealing
Yeah.
with it?
Yeah. So this one's a sort of tricky one for me because in my industry, our concern and our work is all about water conservation
Mhm.
and water quality. And as we know, these AI systems use a lot of fresh, clean water to process and to cool down their systems.
Sure.
So, sort of at an organizational level, we take the position of we don't utilize AI or automation um, unless it's baked into different programs that we're using. So, for example, like I use Grammarly a lot because I'm an awful speller. I just can't for the life of me do it. So, spell check and that kind of thing saves my life all the time. And so AI is baked into part of Grammarly. Uh, it's just kind of a reality. But we also use Microsoft 365. I don't personally use Copilot or anything like that, just because I don't feel that I need it at this point, and because it feels like more of an explicit sort of chat bot, if you'll say. And then there's things like ChatGPT. So we don't use these resources because of those water resource concerns. But when we do access it and we do run into it within those programs that it's baked into, again, it's double checking. So you were mentioning it. It's like you can use it to, um, it's recommending changes or what have you. but you're not taking that explicitly and then just copying and pasting it to whatever you're doing. You're always double checking for maybe mistakes that you're missing or things that are hallucinating, which is always so fascinating how that works. So,
It's
yeah.
Yeah.
it's also good to know that ultimately the responsibility is with your organization. So like you can't hide behind a tool
No.
for what you publish. And so
Yeah.
like you can't say, oh, well, the AI, that's the AI's fault. No, you
Mm-hmm.
published it. You may have
Yeah.
Mhm.
used AI to make it, but
Totally.
you were the one who ultimately posted it. And so just knowing that it is your organization's liability, just like with the ADA
Mm-hmm.
compliance, like you are ultimately responsible for
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
content. And so there isn't there isn't an out by saying, oh, well, the AI did it. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we're held to a higher standard because we are a local government unit. We
yeah.
operate with the tax and levy authority. So obviously we are representing the folks that are within our community and pay that tax and levy. And so it's important that we really use those funds properly
Yeah.
and not make mistakes like posting incorrect information that's created by AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a really important point you bring up, Abby, about the environmental impacts of AI. It's something that we all have to be aware of and think about. It's for us as a group of professionals who live with disabilities, many of us are neurodivergent. AI is, for me, was just a godsend. It's and there are studies out there that show that people who are neurodivergent are way more productive with AI than people who are not neurodivergent. And I mean, for some of us, it's like it doesn't matter if I'm in a depressive episode, something can think for me and move me forward. Whereas I used to have to
100%.
take days off work to try to get my brain back.
Yeah. And I just to piggyback on that too, Lynn, like it is such, those studies are amazing and it is such a great tool for people. And the strides that have been made in the conservation movement on the data center side are actually huge. So the what we're seeing, and I've been talking to some experts on this because it is concerning, and
Mhm.
we're in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes. We love our water. But the strides that have been made are massive. So the some of the data that is out there is 20 years old and it hasn't caught up to the actual practices of the cooling systems. And so there have been, just like with any industry, there have been massive movements to conserve more water and to like make these things more efficient. There's what they call closed systems. So they put they fill it once and they close it and it just recycles over and over. So it's not using more water. So there are lots of strides happening in that area. And I think the last statistic that I heard, and I don't know, don't quote on this, but like the idea is that for each prompt, it's like 3 drops of water.
Oh,
So just to put it in some context,
well,
like,
that's wonderful to
and
know.
our phones are, they're using just as much as an AI. So
Oh, yeah.
that's a whole different conversation though.
Well, we've got a few minutes before we go into questions. So that's your cue, audience. If you want to pop anything into the chat, now is a good time. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up is something that my team has struggled with is the types of images that you use in social media. Is it okay to use infographics? I know that we've struggled and made decisions on our team about using certain types of moving images because we leave the controls to the client, to the viewer. But as someone who started in accessibility back in 2008. And I remember what it's like to think that this is all about one certain type of disability, but also as a person who's neurodiverse. I'm a visual learner. And I think I need things to be visually attractive for me to be able to learn from them. And there's that side of that too. So, any thoughts? Abby, do you have any thoughts on what you guys do post and don't post and how you kind of bridge that gap between, strict sense of it's kind of I mean to me it's like it's all about one disability type
Uh,
versus how you're being inclusive with your images.
yeah, I think this goes back to what I was mentioning before about grabbing that key information from your infographic and posting it in the
Mhm.
body. Because I'm a very visual person myself, I rely upon that kind of eye-catching, um, you know, aesthetically pleasing, interesting to look at sort of thing to really help me like guide my way visually, like through a document. Um, Nothing kind of irks me more than a document that is, or using incorrect bullet points or sort of little things in between that really are distracting from the actual content of the document, um, or an infographic in this case. Um, so we still use infographics, and I think they're great. But just knowing where they're being posted and how they're being sort of consumed, and making sure that that key information is actually posted into the body. So there's like an alternative. So we're touching, getting all bases touched. So folks who need that visual side of things are still able to engage with the infographic, but someone who's using a screen reader is able to engage with the content of the infographic, and nobody's excluded in that process.
That's great, great. Any response to that, Valerie?
Yeah, I think to your point, Lynn, I think as long as you are giving some option of like controlling that, um, I agree that it's good to provide both. Obviously you don't want to use things that are like super fast flickering or like because even people without a neurological disorder are going to have trouble with that kind of imagery. So you have to kind of balance that out and like use stuff that maybe is like slower moving or you can
Hmm.
control the on and off of it. Um, with videos, I think anytime that you can provide information in multiple ways, do that. Like, don't just rely
Yes.
on one way if there are multiple ways to be inclusive of it, because people are at all different levels of understanding. They're at all different levels of engaging, and I think it's really important to have multiple ways to engage with anything that you're putting out there. Um, especially when it's important information. Like, don't just rely on one method of
Hmm.
communication.
So, text, so writing social media, and it's something we don't talk about a lot because we tend to think it's, again, about one disability type, usually blindness. But, clear writing really has a place in social media. Any thoughts on that, Valerie?
Yeah, I think just as clear as you can be, don't you don't have to have your messages be convoluted. Like they need to be clear and simple.
Hmm.
Um, make it as easy as possible for someone to understand what you're trying to convey. Um, Again, this is a place where I have leaned on AI pretty heavily just to help me make sure that I am creating the simplest message that I can and getting the information that needs to get out there. You don't have to use big words and fancy graphics and all of that. It needs to be simple and precise.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we really struggled with, what I struggled with as the first accessible communication specialist at that was probably in state government at the time, was that I had people who were heads of departments. Now, I was doing this more in web writing. We had just it Facebook, going on Facebook was a very new thing. At that time, Department of Transportation in Canada was managing real time on Facebook issues within their transit systems, where somebody could just go onto Facebook and say the elevator isn't working at this train platform. And we thought that was all really cool. That was all very brand new in those days. But what the problem I had with website writing is that I had an executive level that did not understand. First of all, they wrote the web page entirely for people who ran small transit programs and were grant recipients. But
There's like five people.
it
That's
was well, it was a network of quite a few people, but the web page was about how to catch a bus.
yes.
Essentially, it was public facing, and I was battling constantly. And, is that something you deal with, Abby, in government? Is that writing a simpler message, getting some pushback on that? I don't
Yeah,
want to
I
out your boss in this or anything.
No, no, not at all. I think industry wide, it is a big concern for all of us, especially for myself, like in the education outreach communication sphere, is science communication. That is a big deal, and I think it'll bring you some comfort to know that like that's coming down all the way to the undergraduate level. We were talking about that when I was an undergrad, and how to properly communicate science. Um, Something that I use a lot is a resource called Hemingway Editor, if anyone's heard of that. It is a really great way to like flag, longer sentences or repetition in sentences. It's a little bit different than Grammarly because it's not giving you like, oh, what sounds nicer or what's like more grammatically correct. It's giving you literally a grade level of like, this is a level, grade
Oh, yeah.
10 type of vocabulary and wording and sentence structure. And for me, this was really something that was very illuminating because at one point when I was introduced to this resource, I ran just a blurb that I posted on our website through that, and it reported back that it was and this is not to toot my own horn, this is just a kind of reality check thing for me, that it was at a post grad level. That is not the way I want to write
Right?
for people
No,
in the public.
they say that the public you should be at about an eighth grade level.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, crud, that's bad. This is not good. I need to bring down my level or bring my writing down to a level that is actually understandable to everybody and not just someone, like who likes to use big words and what have you. And again, it's not to make myself seem any way in particular. I thought it was a negative to be writing like that and wanting to improve my writing so that everybody in my community and within the district can understand what we're trying to communicate here. And that's not just for, uh, uh, folks who are, um, reading at different levels. This is also like English as a second language. And folks who, haven't had an entire lifetime of living in an English speaking country and as a first language. It's just a challenge.
It's for also for people who are just having a day where they don't have the cognitive bandwidth to
Totally.
understand things and like they just need to get the information. So yeah, I think
Totally.
it helps for even temporary
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
Great points. I apologize for being a little distracted, and I apologize that someone was advertising their product in our chat. That person has been removed from the webinar. So would like to just open up the platform for questions from the audience at this point. There any questions, Ellen, that we have out there?
I'm not seeing Stacy.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll just keep talking then. So, one thing that we had talked about a little bit prior to the webinar is something that maybe is not something everybody deals with every day, but is a concern. And that's managing your social media interaction and protecting particularly users with disabilities from interaction harassment. I happen to know personally of someone, a professional that I've worked with living with a disability who is harassed on social media in part because of their disability, and it got really out of hand and really ugly. So I know Val, you've had some experience with this, and I was wondering if you'd mind speaking to that a little bit.
Yeah, it is. I mean, everybody has seen it. There's people that feel very confident saying horrible things to people on the internet and on social media, particularly. I have, been in a situation where I have had death threats and had people doxing me online, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of legal repercussion for that. So it's difficult to navigate from a channel perspective. Like if you are managing that page, there isn't a lot you can really do besides having some kind of policy or, a, a like I'm trying to think of the word I'm thinking of, but like a policy for your page where you can't kick them off. Like being a public entity, you can't remove people, you can't really like you can't do anything about their posts, but you can put it out there that you want people to be respectful on your page, and that just reminding them to be good human beings is helpful, but there's not a lot of legal repercussion that can come from somebody being a jerk online. um
Okay.
I ended up in court. We There was nothing that really could be done about the situation um until it's too late, honestly. Like there has to be something that happens that from
Mm.
that, more than them just talking. And so it's hard to navigate that.
Did the court action stop them?
It actually did by just going, even though there was
Yeah.
no legal outcome from it, but it did, like the action of that actually stopped the behavior.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Abby, do you have any thoughts or insights on this you want to share?
Yeah, I think, Valerie, you touched on it. When you're working in the public sector, um, you're not able to moderate your social media in the same way that a private entity can because of our First Amendment right to free speech. So I think I'll say that uh, if you're in a situation in which you're looking at a public entity's social media and there is negative talk or speech in the comments, or someone's posting odd things or something like that, know that those entities likely already know about it, aren't particularly big fans of it, but have to respect that First Amendment right. And we can't block people, we can't delete comments, we can't hide comments. And so you're, like you said, Valerie, the one way you can interact with that content is by responding in sort of a general sense of, please maintain a level of civility within the comment section. But oftentimes you may just see that organizations don't respond to that content. And that's the position
Mhm.
that we often take, is that we just don't engage. Unfortunately, we don't experience a lot of that kind of thing because we're a smaller local government. But, if you're like Minnesota Department of Transportation and it's construction season, people are going to have some nasty
Yeah.
things to say about you.
Yes.
Lots
So,
of opinions.
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So one of my friends who was a planner used to say that there's only so many bunt cakes you can take to a public meeting. before they stop making a difference. Yeah, and when you build things in people's neighborhoods, yeah, it's dicey.
Well, and
So,
I think people kind of forget that social media has become our marketplace. Like that is the square. That's the town square. That's
yep,
where people are sharing information, and it has to be protected for those reasons. Like we do have, unfortunately, we do have to allow speech that we don't agree with to happen there because that is where people are going for information. And so replaced, um, it has replaced that in our
yeah,
society.
yeah,
So
absolutely. So we're going to close it out, and I'm not seeing any questions come in. So clearly you're answering all of their questions. But Abby, could you leave the audience with um, maybe just a tip of what perhaps what you had wished you had known earlier that you do now in social media?
Oh, yeah. Um, I would leave the audience with the idea that this is an evolving process and that it's okay that you don't know everything now, and that with time and practice, you will learn, and that the process of learning is a wonderful one, and you will come out on the other side of it
Yeah.
more engaged and more aware of what you need to do to accomplish your goals with web accessibility. So it's okay. It's gonna be all right.
Yeah, and I think that this, this period of time, this extension, like you're saying, using this as a practice period. I mean, we just, we felt like we knew so many governments that were going to get sued because they just weren't ready. And you've got this time now, and you've saved the money from getting sued that you can now put into not getting sued and creating that sustainable system and giving yourself that permission to, you've got the time now, use it. So great. Valerie.
I think I wish that I would have realized that I could start now and like if you start good practices for the stuff that you're doing from here on out, this time can be a time to look back and kind of remediate and look at the other thing. Like the good thing about social media is that it is forgotten quickly. It passes quickly, right? And so even if you just start today with the basics, you can build on that and make things better moving forward. So you don't have to get so stuck on not that you haven't known. Like you can just
Right.
literally just start and you have time to remediate those things that live on and that will still be there. And yeah, there's time.
Well, thank you to you both. We really appreciate the expertise. I'm just scouting out our next webinar for July, and I'm not seeing the date. Christina or Ellen, do you have it so we can let people know? We're going to be focusing next month on video and streaming accessibility, and we're hoping to have the incomparable Dana Healy on this, who is with Media Scribe, and I can't remember the parent company, but everybody
Tightrope.
knows. Excuse me?
I think it's tightrope.
Tightrope Media,
Yeah.
yes, and she and I have worked together on a number of education initiatives. So thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you to Abby and Valerie for your information. We will be sending out that handout to your email address where you registered so that you'll have that in your email box by tomorrow. Thank you for everybody for attending and have a fantastic day. The sun is out in Minnesota and it's a beautiful June day, so get outside. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Lynn.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. Have a super day. Talk to you later.